Good evening. I'm Marnie Smith from the Burlington Public Library, and I'm thrilled to host tonight's program, She's on the Case, with mystery writers Sulari Gentill, Phillippi Ryan, Eva Jurczyk, moderated by Rachel Raczka. Thank you to the three fabulous authors joining us tonight, and to Rachel for moderating. I also want to thank the 29 other libraries who are partnering with Burlington tonight. One of the unexpected benefits of the COVID pandemic is the ability of libraries to share programs and bring together an audience from many libraries to enjoy them. And a special thanks to Mandy Shahal from Sourcebooks for putting this program together. There will be some time at the end of the program tonight for questions, so please enter any you may have in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as possible. Rachel Kim Raczka is our moderator tonight. She's an editor for the Boston Globe's Living Arts section and an adjunct professor of journalism and creative writing at Brandeis University and Emerson College in Boston. Rachel, let's get started. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and it is so exciting to see the participant numbers grow. It was like opening the doors. Well, I know all of you who are here are not here to see me, so I will jump right in and introduce our amazing authors tonight. So starting off with Sulari Gentill, I have a very impressive biography to read through right now. So, so after setting out to study astrophysics and graduating in law and abandoning her legal career to write books, Sulari now grows French black truffles on her farm in the foothills of the Snowy Mountains in Australia, which sounds incredibly idyllic. She was named a USA Today best-selling author of The Woman of the Library. It received 3-starred reviews and was recently named by Bookpage and Library Reads as a best book of 2022. Her Roland Sinclair, yes, exciting. Her Roland Sinclair mysteries have won and or been shortlisted for the Davitt Award. I hope I'm saying Davitt correctly. Davitt Award.
That's correct.
And the Commonwealth Writers Prize. And her standalone metafiction thriller, After She Wrote Him, won the Ned Kelly Award for Best Crime Novel in 2018. Her 10th Sinclair novel, A Testament of Character, was shortlisted for the Ned Kelly Best Crime Novel in 2021. Welcome, Sulari.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
Hank Ryan, if you are local, needs absolutely no introduction, but I'll read it anyways because it's very fun, is the USA Today bestselling author of 14 novels of suspense. She has also won multiple prestigious awards for her crime fiction, including 5 Agathas, 5 Anthony's, and the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award. She is also an on-air investigative reporter for Boston's WHDH TV and has won 37 Emmys, 14 Edward R. Murrow Awards, and dozens of other honors for her groundbreaking journalism. National book reviews have called Hank a, quote, master of crafting suspenseful mysteries and a, quote, superb and gifted storyteller, which I can also attest to. Hank's novels have been named Best Thrillers of the Year by Library Journal, New York Post, BookBub, Pop Sugar, Real Simple Magazine, and others. Her current book is Her Perfect Life, a chilling psychological standalone about fame, family, and revenge. It received starred reviews from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, which called it a superlative thriller and was an Agatha Award nominee for Best Novel, and it is very juicy. Her upcoming thriller is The House Guest, right behind me, and it's coming out in February 2023. Welcome, Hank.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and so many people. It's fantastic. Welcome, everyone.
So last but certainly not least, Eva Jurczyk. is a librarian and debut author of the Department of Rare Books and Special Collections, which has been called a, quote, rare treat for readers by Matthew Sullivan, the author of Midnight at the Bright Ideas Bookstore, with author Karen Joy Fowler noting, who doesn't love a mystery involving rare books and bad librarians? I have to say that book was on my wish list for so long, and I absolutely agree. The Department of Rare Books and Special Collections was a January 22 Indie Next Pick, a Pop Sugar Must Reads mystery, and an international bestseller. Eva has also written for Jezebel, The Owl, The Rumpus, and Publishers Weekly. Welcome.
Hi, these two are a tough acts to follow, but thank you. And I'm so excited to be here with you all.
We're so excited to have the three of you. I'm dying to get into spoiler territory, but I promise to everyone here that I will not. However, I think maybe it would be great to get us all on the same footing, and everyone can give us a pitch of your current or upcoming work in whatever order you'd like to go. I know that can be difficult on Zoom sometimes. Sulari, do you want to go first? Stick to the
Yeah. Look, I'm going to have to give you a pitch of The Woman in the Library. I do have an upcoming work, but because of the way I write, I have no idea how it's going to turn out at the moment, so I can't really pitch it. So The Woman in the Library is really a story within a mystery folded into the pages of a correspondence. It opens with a letter. The letter is written to Hannah, who is an established Australian author, and it is written by a man who signs himself off as Leo. And in the beginning, Leo is everything anyone could want from a correspondent and a friend and a writerly friend. He is sharing and giving and admiring, but as the book progresses and we hear more from Leo and we see a letter from Leo at the end of every chapter, we come to realize that there's something quite dark about the man. He knows an awkward amount about the mechanics of murder, for one thing. Excuse my creaking door. So the other facet of the novel is the story that Hannah herself writes in response to the advice and the letters that she's getting from Leo. And her story is based around a young writer who is in Boston under the auspice of a very prestigious scholarship, who happens to be in the Boston Public Library, trying to begin her very worthy novel when there is a primal, terrified scream which rings out through the reading room, and everybody stops everything they're doing because you know instinctively that something awful has happened. But when an investigation is conducted, there seems to be nothing. There's no body, there's no reason for the scream. But of course, this is a mystery novel, so there was.
Amazing.
And yeah, I don't think I can say anything more without telling you how it all turns out.
I know it is really tough, but as far as I can tell, no spoilers, but lots of suspense. I should be. Hank, do you want to go next?
And let me just say that, Sulari, I just loved that book. I loved it. I know I've told you this 1,000 times. It's one of the best books I've ever read. And when I heard I was going to be on with the two of you tonight, I was just raving. These are just two of the best books of the year. So I'm very, very honored to be here with you both tonight. I love the books, and you all will absolutely love them too. I'm going to talk very quickly about two books. My current book, so casually displayed on the door behind me, Her Perfect Life, stars Lily Atwood. You can get this right now, so I'll talk about it briefly. Stars Lily Atwood, and Lily Atwood is a famous Boston television personality. She's so beloved that her fans have created a hashtag for her, #PerfectLily. And Lily seems to have everything. She has fame, she has fortune, she has Emmys. She's the single mom to an adorable 7-year-old daughter. But Lily also has a pretty deep, dark secret, a big, ugly, career-ending, maybe life-ending secret, which she begins to realize that someone is about to tell. And Lily needs to keep this secret out of the public eye. But she begins to realize, how can you keep a secret if you're always in the spotlight. Everyone knows Lily Atwood, and that may be her biggest problem. So bottom line, her perfect life is two smart women facing off in a high stakes psychological cat and mouse game to prove their truth about a terrifying childhood betrayal. But in this cat and mouse game, which character is the cat and which character is the mouse? And I do write cat and mouse thrillers, and I know that we can talk about that as the night goes on. But my new book, which comes out in February, The House Guest, I have begun to call this Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise. And you can get from that sort of what it's about. It stars Alyssa McAllen, who has for the past 8 years been happily married to the rich and wealthy and manipulative and powerful Bill McAllen, who one morning just walks out. And that is how the book begins. And Alyssa cannot figure out why her husband has suddenly left her friendless, penniless, and soon to be almost homeless. And she really needs a friend. And one night she finds a friend, a new ally named Bree, who has some problems of her own. And the two women decide that maybe they can band together and solve each other's problems. So if you are thinking strangers on a train, don't think that, because this is Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise. And the moral of which is you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you deserve. And that is The House Guest.
Amazing. I was lucky enough to read it early, so everyone is in for a treat.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Hank. Eva.
I was also lucky enough to read The House Guest early, and it is a twisty treat. You all are going to love it. So my book is The Department of Rare Books and Special Collections, and it follows Liesl Weiss on her and it starts on her very first day as the head of a prestigious rare books library. So she's not new to this place. She's actually worked there for decades, for her entire career. But for all that time, she's been second in command to one of these charismatic man of letters. We all know the type. And she's deferred to him. She's done a lot of the behind the scenes work. She hasn't really gotten a lot of credit. But when he falls ill, she all of a sudden gets the #1 job. And immediately, starting on that very first day, things begin to go wrong. First, a priceless manuscript goes missing, and then one of the librarians does. And at every turn, Liesl's told, don't bring in the police, just keep the doors open, keep the donors happy. And she's trying to unravel these mysteries. And as she does so, she's learning that nothing in this place and no one in this place is really what she thought that they were after all this time that she had worked there. So it's a great look behind the curtain, beyond the shelves, around the corner of a rare books library. But it's also about a woman learning her worth. And a woman at work. So if you're interested in the world of libraries, and I suspect that you all are because you're here, then it's a fun mystery for you.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if this is the correct direction for everybody, but as we move into discussion, if you do have questions, please feel free to take note of them as we move forward. I will certainly be opening up conversation to our amazing authors towards the end of the chat. So I will not take up all of the time. I know all of you must have burning questions about the books and about the process. So please, please, please flood our chat panel with them. I think just so we can get to that sooner, maybe we jump into questions if that's okay with everyone. Perfect. I suspect we have lots of Boston area locals with us tonight. So I'm going to jump off on a limb and also say, Sulari, it's so funny when this chat got posed to me, I immediately jumped, mostly because I recognized all three of your names, but also because I edited the interview that you had done with the Globe when the Women in the Library first came out. And I was fascinated with the idea of you writing this book from Australia about Boston while doing, I believe, FaceTimes and Zooms about Boston with somebody who was here.
Oh no, look, it wasn't even as complicated as FaceTimes and Zoom. It was mostly emails.
Oh my gosh. Still technology is our friend.
So look, the story behind how that all happened was, I was writing the 10th Roland Sinclair novel, which is also set in Boston, but I had never been to Boston. And so I was trying to get some authenticity in the setting and make sure I knew what I was doing. And luckily I had a friend who happened to be, who's an American writer, and he happened to be working in the Boston Public Library writing his novel. And so I contacted Larry and said, do you mind if I pick your brain while you're there, just so that I can get a handle on Boston? And he, of course, with, typical largesse, was, yes, of course, anything you need, just let me know. But Larry happens to be a much better researcher than I am, and that became evident very quickly. Not only would he answer my questions, but he would send me menus and maps and weather reports. Then he started taking photographs of the sidewalks so I could understand how they were cobbled. And then one day there was a murder about a block from where he was staying. And he thought, oh, Sulari's a mystery writer. She might be really interested in what an American crime scene looks like. And so he took himself off down to this crime scene after the body had been removed, and he took footage of it. And so I'm in Australia, I receive an email from Larry, I open the file attached, and up pops what's very obviously the scene of a murder. And my husband, who happened to be standing behind me at the time, said, gosh, I hope Larry's not killing people so he can send you research. and that was the beginnings of this new book, The Woman in the Library, and it all just sort of emanated from there. And throughout the whole process of writing, of course, it was 2020, nobody was going anywhere for a research trip or anything else. And so the best thing that I could do was to constantly feedback the novel to Larry and get him to comment on setting and so on. And so it was a really interesting meta experience, even just writing the novel, because I was actually doing what Hannah was doing and taking Larry's feedback. And sometimes, he'd make a comment about an Australianism that I'd used inappropriately, and sometimes I would correct the manuscript, and sometimes I would just simply put it into one of Leo's letters. So that's how it all came across. And so Eva was with me when I visited the Boston Public Library for the first time when we were on tour last month, and it was just an amazing experience to see whether you build up this very rich picture in your head of this setting that you're writing about, and then you visit it in real life and see whether it matches and see whether the real setting can live with the setting that you imagined. And luckily for me, Larry's feedback was good enough that the real Boston Public Library sat happily with the one in my head.
Well, it is a beautiful, beautiful space. And I do remember reading that and thinking, Larry's up to something. Like, it's like something is going on.
Well, it was Leo. Larry is perfectly law binding. It was Leo. I feel that
it is not a real person. Well, I'm just, and Hank, this happens, I believe almost all of your novels take place in the Boston area, if I'm correct, or in Boston adjacent areas. And, just for both of you, is there anything about, and again, we are Boston, we love hearing about Boston. So is there anything special about Boston that makes it a great setting for mystery novels?
Oh, golly, that's a great question. I have to say that Sulari, when I read your book, and it opens with this brilliant scene in the reading room of the Boston Public Library, where I have been, unlike you, a million times. And it was so evocative and so gorgeous and just took me right there. And I'm in awe of how you did that. I do think that one of the fun things about living in Boston and living in Massachusetts and writing about the place where I lived and have lived for, golly, 30 some years, is that I know it's fun for local readers, at least, or people who have been here, to say, oh, I know that place. You know, I've seen that place. I've been in that snow. I've been in that restaurant. And it's so real to me that my husband and I will be driving along the Mass Turnpike, and I'll say, oh, exit 17. This is where Jane was chased by the bad guy. And then I think, no, I made that up. That did not happen. I mean, some of the places in the books are so real. The Charles River and the Common and the Public Garden and the snow always plays a big role in my novels, because that's so Boston. But the thing about Boston is it's so old, and it's, you know, by US standards, it's so old and it's so new. And there's a lot going on in Boston, a lot of innovation, a lot of technology, and that's fun to write about. But there are neighborhoods, and there are people who are set in their ways, and there are ways that people talk, and there's what people care about, and there's the view from the top of the Prudential and what you can see from the State House. All those kinds of characters. The entire city has a character. Each neighborhood has a character. And I love being able to take my readers inside those places. As a reporter, you know, I've wired myself with hidden cameras and confronted corrupt politicians and chased down criminals and gone undercover and in disguise and in places that most people have not ever gone. So it's that adventure, the adventure of Boston, that makes me love writing Her Perfect Life and The House Guest. I really take you there.
I think for me, Boston, to people who aren't American, Boston seems to personify America. You know, it's got that history with the Boston Tea Party. It's got the elegance of the East Coast, but it's also got the neighborhoods and the grittiness and things that have happened in recent history that have all fed in to what that city represents outside America. And so I think that's why I was very drawn to picking Boston as the location for this book. And also Larry happened to be there. So if Larry happened to be working in the New York Public Library, this book might have been set differently. But the other thing that I've always tried to work within my books is to sketch rather than to do a full-bodied oil painting for my readers. So readers bring in to a book, whenever they read it, the wealth of knowledge that they have, the memories that they have, the experiences, the things that they've seen and touched. So what I hope that I do is I sketch enough that it's evocative for people who know Boston. They can bring their memories into my book. And for those who don't know Boston, they can imagine it, or they can imagine something similar. And that's, you know, and that's what I'm hoping works in terms of detail, because I don't have that beautiful tapestry of detail that Hank can bring to her books, because of course I visited Boston for the first time after the book was written. But I hope that I can draw on the commonality of awe, of appreciation of beauty, of appreciation of history, of the way society works and how people interact. That's, you know, common to everybody.
And also the way things don't work. I mean, there's an air conditioner on Park Street that when you walk underneath it, that drops water on every pedestrian that walks by. Or that the snow plows never work, or that people put things in their parking spaces that they've shoveled out, and woe betide you if you move that folding chair from that parking place. I mean, that's only Boston, and that's one phrase, but it really takes you there.
Yeah.
The parking spot save is almost a law here, so you cannot move that chair. It will result very poorly. It may be more sort of like civilian law, but
Well, I tried to
is,
do a story about it, Rachel, once. As a
really?
reporter, I tried to do a story about how unfair and essentially illegal it was to sort of usurp public space for your own parking. And I went to the mayor's office, a different mayor than we have now, and said, what about this? Isn't this terrible? And the mayor's like, yeah, it's fine. So much for law.
That's the amazing thing about, when you research a setting. Nowadays, we have access to Google, we have maps, we have books, but what you really need is to talk to a local, because it's only through locals that you're going to get information like that.
Oh, Boston certainly has its quirks. I was thinking about what both of you were saying, where it's like, we have the snow and we have the cobblestones, and those are my ultimate enemies. So it's like, I can imagine this is a difficult place to solve a mystery.
Well, and you know that you're never going to have a woman in high heels running on the cobblestones, especially a reporter, as in my books, because you could not do that. You would fall, or at least that's a way to have somebody fall. But that's using your setting to make the story move along. If it's suddenly a blizzard and you can't see your hand in front of your face, you're going to make different decisions than you do in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Boston it's just sort of like tough on the elements as well, I think, just in terms of, trying to get things done. So despite not having been here, Sulari, I thought you did a wonderful job, and I love the reading room. So as I'm sure many people here do as well. I was waiting for, as soon as we started talking about the parking spots, the chat to just blow up of like, I believe I should have my parking spot. So I'm relieved that didn't happen. But this is, I guess this might also lead me into sort of what I'm always so fascinated with mystery as a genre. And Eva, like I think you do an incredible job with this, like this idea of pacing in a mystery novel. And all three of you are masters at this. And this idea of how do you know when to reveal things and how do you plot things out? Are all of you plotters? I'm not sure of how everyone feels about that, like plotters or pantsers terminology, but I am curious in the world of mystery, how does that work for all of you?
I happen to know that it works very differently for Sulari and I because we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
So, and I think that this might be because I'm not astrophysicist / lawyer, so clearly not as smart as Sulari is. But in all seriousness, I don't think mystery maybe came naturally to me. So when I decided that I was going to write a mystery, I really needed the structure of a mystery. So I'm a plotter. I like the idea of an outline. I think if left to my own devices, I would just write sort of characters saying snappy dialogue to each other, and not a lot would happen in the book. So I like the structure of a plot and an outline. And what's really fun for me, what I really loved about a mystery was, you write that plot, you write to the outline, you fill it in, and then when I read a mystery, or when I watch a movie that's a mystery, my favorite thing about it is going back and reading or watching it again once you know what's going to happen, and seeing all those pieces. And if you're a reader or viewer who likes to do that, let me tell you, you should write a mystery novel, because what's more fun than going and seeing somebody else do that is going back and doing it yourself. So you had the structure, you thought you knew what was going to happen, you wrote it all out, and then you get to go back and you get to lay Easter eggs, and you get to move things around, and you get to decide when this reveal is too late or too early, or I want to hold on to this for a little bit. And getting to do that and think about that and move those things around and think about when you're going to reveal information to the reader, I thought was really, really fun. So I guess I am a plotter, but that part of it, the going back and adding and moving and thinking about what works best for the story, I guess that part's a little bit more organic. Sulari, on the other hand, I know does it very differently.
Yeah,
Sulari has the best description of how she does that. It's even in your book.
Well, yeah, I'm an extreme pantser. So, the description in the book is actually a little bit more ordered than the way I do it. So I think,
oh dear, the bus description.
Freddie describes her process as hopping onto a bus and the bus has a route of some sort, and people hop on and off, and she has no idea. There's who's going to hop on, who's going to hop off, what they're going to do while they're on the bus. I'm actually a little bit less ordered than that. I think I'm walking. I'm not catching any bus. I'm just wandering the streets and hoping that the story works out. I'm an extreme pantser. I just sit down and I start writing. I had a friend who was a cognitive psychologist who analyzed my process. And she was explaining to me that there actually is a rhyme and reason to what I do. So the creative center of your brain is your prefrontal cortex, so that area here. And the thing with the prefrontal cortex is it's very difficult to access directly. So that's why when you lose a word and you're trying to work out what that word is, you can't find it. You go away and you do something else and suddenly the word pops into your head. I'm basically doing that for 100,000 words and just letting the novel pop into my head. I watch television while I write. I sit down in my pajamas and I watch television. It's always the same sort of show. It's something like Midsummer Murders or Lewis, something that has a very sedate, ordered pace, and something that has a similar rhythm, so that I don't have to concentrate too much on the television show. It takes about 30% of my brain, keeps that active, and the other 70% is just then free to write uninhibited. And that's how I do it. I always write forward. I never go backwards. So and that is problematic sometimes, because it feels to me like once I write it, that's what happened. So editing is actually a bit of a challenge for me, because I've got to go back and change what happened when it feels like I'm lying. That's not what happened.
I understand that so totally. I'm sort of a mixture of you two, because I don't have an outline at all. And my editors have said to me, can you just send us an outline of your novel? And I say, no, because I don't know what happens until it happens.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen until I write it. And then I can know. So people say, oh my golly, your books are so twisty and turning. I never saw that coming. And I'm like, yeah, wasn't that a surprise? And people say, the ending, I was so shocked by that. And I say, yeah, could you believe that's what, talk about a surprise ending. I surprise myself every time. And Sue Grafton used to call that the magic of writing. And it happens to you too, Eva, the magic, even when you're making an outline, the magic of creating a new story, how our writer brains work to know the rhythm of what a story has to be, motivation and desire, and the decisions people make when they're faced with an obstacle. That's a story.
Yeah, when the characters take over. And, in the end, it feels to me like no point plotting. My characters do what they want to do. They just take off. And so
if you're lucky, when you're lucky.
Yeah,
when everything's working properly.
So it is exactly as you say, Hank. It's the magic of it. And I always say to people, we talk a lot about process and how we do what we do in interviews like this, but there's always this little black space where we're not even sure. And that's the magic. And I don't poke it too much, because I'm afraid that if I poke it too much, it'll stop. And so I just let it be. There's that. This is what I think I'm doing, but I'm not entirely sure.
But Eva, when you're working with your outline, there must be times when it changes, when the story evolves in a way that you hadn't planned.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I have to say my outline and my plan is always it's short, it's a few sentences about what's going to happen and what's going to break out. And I think the surprises, like Sulari said, your characters surprise you. And there are reveals and things in my book that I certainly did not know were going to be there, but then that you find the characters are interacting with each other in a way that suggests something that you didn't know was coming at all. And that is, like you said, it's where the magic where the magic lies.
Yeah.
I think I'm a little bit different from you, Sulari, in that I love editing. I like going in and taking something and then taking it apart and finding different ways that it can maybe go together. I find that really fun. Maybe I'm a puzzler. Maybe that's it. Maybe I like puzzles. This is what I'm learning about myself. And in doing that, when putting the pieces together a little bit differently, you can find that there can be very different outcomes. So in writing this book, I knew who the culprit would be from the beginning, and that didn't change. I knew who was going to be the bad guy, bad person, the thief, and that didn't change at all. But just about everything else did.
Yeah. Yeah, I sometimes think of myself as a sculptor with something hard like marble. So it feels to me like the story's there. It's always there. I'm just digging it out.
Yeah, you just have to find
but it sounds to me like you're working with clay or plasticine. It's a lot more malleable, and you can make it move.
And as I'm writing, when I go back and look at what I've written, I think, oh, that's who was on the phone. Oh, that's why she went there. Oh, that's why she was upset. And there are so many. I mean, Lee Child used to talk about starting to write a book like those cooking shows where they give you a refrigerator full of stuff. And in the first 100 pages of my book, I'm filling up my refrigerator with ingredients. And then for the second half of the book, I'm creating something out of the ingredients that are in my refrigerator. I'm making the final dish out of the ingredients that I created without really knowing why they were there. And then if you're lucky at the end, you see the theme, the thing that you were really writing about, not just the mystery, not just the plot, but the reason for the story somehow emerges without you even having done it on purpose. I mean, Eva, your story about a woman who's getting her power and learning who she is and, finally being recognized for who she is. I mean, did you go into the book with that idea?
No, I don't think so. But I think that when I started to write about a woman at work, which is what the story is about, it's a mystery, but it happens to be the main character is a woman and she happens to be working. It's almost hard not to work that in, because if you're a woman who's at work, who's been in this professional situation for a long time, you might, or you likely will, encounter some of the things that she has encountered in her career. And when you're writing about a character, you would hope that by the end of that work, that character would have developed or grown or changed in some way. So it's certainly not what I thought I was going to write about, but how could you not have that experience for that character when you put her in that place?
Yeah, but those sort of things sort of emerge as how could you not at the end of the novel?
Exactly.
The novel, it may not have been in your contemplation at all, and then
Definitely
suddenly you realize that subconsciously or something, there was something there that you wanted or needed to say, and everything that's happened in the story has moved towards that.
Yeah.
This happens to me every time. I saw an interview with David McCullough, the historian David McCullough, who was asked, do you have a theme for every book you write? And he said, yes, I do. And I write the book to find out what it is. And that just seems so perfect. Or sometimes I'll send my manuscript in to my editor and she'll write back, oh, I love this. For instance, in the House Guest, I love this story about friendship. And I'm like, yeah, friendship. That's totally what it's about. Female friendship, totally what I meant. She saw the big picture. Have you all had that happen?
Oh yeah, it's lovely when readers and reviewers see things in our books that we've missed. and it's really, and sometimes once they point it out, you think, how could I have missed that? How could I have not known that was there? But
Hank, I have to say, I love your metaphor about the fridge and filling up your fridge with the ingredients and then making something, the rest of the book you spend making something with those ingredients, because I found with the House Guest, when I was reading it, the ingredients that you put in the fridge in the beginning, you talked about strangers on a train when you were sort of pitching the book. And so as a reader, I think you maybe even mentioned strangers on a train in the text, and you think, okay, I know where this is going. I know what's going to happen. And then you really turn it on its head and turn it on its head again. And it doesn't go that way at all. And so I'm wondering, like, when you were putting those ingredients in the fridge, were they the ingredients for something more in line with that type of story first, and then it sort of surprised you and turned into something different? Or I guess, how do you get so twisty? And I can't reveal anything about this book because no one else can read it until February, but you all are going to love it.
Oh, thank you.
Did you make roast chicken? Did you make dessert out of roast chicken, Hank?
Yeah.
It's funny because I think we all have this, we all have the same situation. It's a wonderful, great situation. You all, when I look over here, I'm looking at all of you who are in the chat. You all are smart readers. You're smart. If you love Sulari's book and Eva's books and my books, you're smart. And so I know as I'm writing, oh, my readers are smart. And if I say strangers on a train, they're going to think, oh, I know strangers on a train. These are two people. They're going to solve each other's problems. I know that. And so then I think, no, well, then I can't do that because that's what you're going to expect. So then I also can't do the next thing that you might figure out, the second most likely thing, because all of you readers are going to figure that out as well. So then I have to do the next, or the next thing. But I do think, Eva, that I can tell you with pure truth that I did not know what was going to happen. I did not know until the very end of the book, the middle of the book, any part of it, what was going to happen at any point. So all along the way, it surprised me. But the thing that sort of meta surprise is those ingredients in the refrigerator. It just shocked me how useful they were as it went on. You know, that's why that reference was there. That's why that sweater was there. That's why that necklace was there. That's why I'm making this up now. This doesn't have anything to do with anything. That's why it was all there. I get myself to the computer every day because I think, ooh, I can't wait to see what happens. And I'm the only one who can make that happen because I'm the one who's writing the book.
But did any of the ingredients go moldy because you didn't use them?
Well, I think that's an editing question, don't you? I mean, you must have this too. There are things that you think, well, are sort of artifacts. Later on in the book, you think, I don't need that anymore. Or I need to wrap that up. I need to pull that thread back in and let the reader see that I didn't just throw that in randomly, even though I did. I didn't just throw it in randomly. It's a useful element of the story, or else it has to go. And I love the editing too, Eva.
Yeah, Hank, you say, and I don't know, we were talking about your books, and I don't know whether it was The House Guest or your previous book, but you said that you got your idea from something that was based in real life. And so I was wondering, like, what do you do with that when you hear a story or a thread of an idea and you think this would make a great book? How much of that winds up in the fridge, and how much of that winds up in the final soup?
Oh, this is making me so hungry. This is totally, I mean, I know it's only 11 in the morning for Sulari, but it's dinner time for us here. Usually I think of an idea as like a domino. It's just the first domino in what turns out to be a row of dominoes that eventually have to all topple over to make the story. Or I like a pebble in the pond. So you have this little idea of a pebble and you drop it in the pond and you see if it creates ripples or if it just sinks to the bottom. And if an idea pebble creates ripples, then I can see that it will sort of be big enough for a whole book. I mean, in The House Guest, for instance, written during the pandemic, my husband, who's a criminal defense attorney, and I are here alone in our home. And Jonathan, as a lawyer, took the kitchen, the kitchen and family room as his office, and I took the study as my office. And, you know, we work for 8 hours a day or longer usually. And I realized that in the before times, I would go to Channel 7 and Jonathan would go to his office downtown and we would work and then we would come home at night. But at the pandemic, we were together. But I realized that even though he's right there, I had no idea what he was doing all day. I had no idea what he was doing. And that if someone said to me, did you know your husband was doing X, Y, and Z? And I would have to say, no, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I know about his cases, but I don't know what he's doing all day for 8 hours at that computer. And that's sort of what started The House Guest. How much do we really know about the people who are closest to us? We think we do, but what if we don't? And what would we do if that were something? Obviously, I write thrillers, if that were something bad. And what if someone thought you were involved as well? And that's all I had. That's all I had at the beginning with this book. So it's just the nugget. Do you feel that way? Do you feel that way, Sulari? Or Eva, how do you take that one little idea and develop it?
Mine's almost in the reverse in terms of your pebble analogy, which is a fantastic analogy. I always think of ideas as having a gravitational pull. And when, I have all sorts of ideas all the time. I'm just one of those wacky people that has crazy ideas. And my husband's learned to live with it. And, it's always what if. But the ones that are going to turn into novels seem to have their own gravitational pull. So I have this idea, and then all of a sudden, everything I see seems to relate to it, and everything I hear on the radio seems to pertain to it. And then another idea comes out of it, and it seems to build. So it's like a snowball rolling down the hill. It's just gathering things and gathering momentum. And when it starts to have that sort of gravitational pull or that stickiness of snow, then I know that it's something that's viable for a story. And that's the idea that gets in ahead of all the other ideas. But what about you, Eva? This was your first book. And you did this incredible thing of basically living your novel in that you are a librarian in the rare books.
Yeah, well, and I think the University of Toronto would like me to state for the record that as far as I know, no one is walking around stealing books from their library. So I didn't live that part. But I think it's something sort of similar to Hank, where, it's a pretty small idea. It's a small little ripple, a priceless manuscript going missing from a rare books library and seeing the way that it radiates out from that. I think it worked, pretty similar to the way that Hank said.
But the depth of your knowledge comes so shiningly through in this book. You made me feel smart when I read it. Talk a little bit about that and the gorgeous books that are starring in your book.
Well, I think similarly to the way that you talked about setting books in Boston, there's such pleasure in specificity in a novel. I really love that. And the books that star in my book, they're all real manuscripts. So if you read rare books and you are interested in the Plantin Polyglot Bible or the Peshawar manuscript, these are all real things that you can go out and Google. And I base them on real things, first because it was fun to sort of shop around and look at the special collections all over the world and see cool stuff they had and imagine that we had them in Toronto, but also the real stories of these things, you couldn't have invented them. So the idea of what we know in the world to be the first recorded use of the zero, that was found in a farmer's field 120 years ago. And this tenant farmer happened to know that when he dug it up, it was something important enough that he passed it on to his landlord, and that got passed on to a university. And then the weird carbon dating thing that happened with that in real life. You couldn't have invented the twists and turns that these stories took, and just getting to bring a little bit of those into a manuscript and getting to share a little bit of that with readers was really exciting. And the research of that was fun too.
Definitely life-changing. I mean, I came out a completely different person after reading your book, Eva, and you too, Sulari, because I'll never look at the library the same way.
Always listening for a scream. It was so tempting when we were in the Boston Public Library
to just scream
and run away
and see if anybody noticed it, or see if anybody said, "Oh, Sulari must be here."
Well, we didn't think source books would be very happy if their writers got arrested, so we didn't. But it was tempting.
I have to say, this is Boston. I don't know that we would be fazed. I think people would be like, "Oh, a tourist." But I'm sure the BPL also appreciated that you didn't test that theory. I want to hop in just because we have amazing reader questions that are coming in. So is it okay if we move on to a few of them before we come up on time?
Sure.
So one of them that came in, I thought was Really lovely. It was, how important is it to your own writing to mentor other budding or established writers? And has mentoring changed or changed how or why you write?
Well, I think Hank's got to start with this because she is mentor extraordinaire and one of the most generous writers there is, for the careers of all of us climbing the ladder after her.
Oh my golly, that is so nice of you, Sulari. Thank you. I mean, I do think that we all write on the shoulders of people who have written before us. And I think that the idea, when I started writing, which was when I was 55, which was 17 years ago or something like that, and I had this, starting to write is this crazy combination of confidence and naivete, because when I decided to write a novel, I said to my husband, I've got a great idea. I'm going to write a book. And Jonathan says, great, honey. He says, do you know how to write a book? And I said, how hard can it be? I've read a million of them. I got this. And it was so hard. And I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing about writing a novel. I mean, I'd been a reporter for 30 years at the time, but I knew nothing about writing a novel and nothing about what it had to be and nothing about the publishing industry and nothing about anything about the nuts and bolts of any part of anything. And so I had to learn from people who helped me. And I just think all of us do this. We bring people up with us. If people have a question or I teach classes a lot. I do a lot of seminars and a lot of, as I said, a lot of seminars, a lot of classes, a lot of education, a lot of sharing. And every time I teach a class, which is often, every time I teach a class, I learn something too. So I think this is one of those communities that helping each other helps us too. It's not a zero-sum game. If you read Sulari's book and you want another book, you can just go get Eva's book, and then you can just go get my book. It's everybody wins. And I feel very honored to be able to work with the new writers to help them follow their dreams like I did.
Yeah, I'm always very honored and surprised when someone wants me to mentor or guide them, because I still feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. But I think the best that I can do is, like Hank, be as open as I can be to any question that anyone asks. And I always try to remember what it was like thinking that there was this club of published writers and there was a key and I didn't have the key to the door. And I don't ever let myself forget that, because I know a lot of aspiring writers, that's what it feels like to them, that like they're locked out of this world that we have access to. And so I try to remember to be as open and as kind and to show them that we don't actually have the key, but you can kick the door in if you really want to.
I have to say that Sulari saying that isn't just lip service. So most of you on the call don't know this, but we just finished a little book tour through the Northeast, and I was lucky enough to tour with Sulari, who is a lot more established than I am. This was my first book, and just like the generosity of this woman and what I learned from her. I came home and was telling my friends and family, this Australian lady is so great and learned so much and was so generous with her knowledge about how this all works. And I learned so much, and it's really changed my approach and the way I thought about some things. So this isn't, I think Hank's mentorship is so visible and so vital. And I've also benefited from it because I was able, she invited me onto her show for my first book, Who Am I? And just getting that sort of platform was so important. But there is this sort of quieter, just being open to questions and being open to share information that Sulari did is so wonderful. It's so funny because a thing that I've learned is that the people who are successful in this business often are because they're really good people and they sort of deserve to be where they are, and they fostered these relationships in a really interesting way. And that's something that I'm hoping to emulate and like learning from women like this early on, it really sets an example that you want to live up to. You're both great.
I love your word foster. I think that's really lovely. And I think that's exactly how it works. I mean, I always think we write alone, but we're not alone. And once you realize that, you know, we write alone, but we're not alone, that can make a lot of difference. I mean, there are other people who are sitting at their computer like I was today going, I have no idea. I don't know whose idea was this in the first place to write this silly book. And I know that tomorrow I will know. Tomorrow I'll figure it out. It's fine. It works. It's just a process. And I do trust that process. And I hope that I can pass that along to other people as well.
And the thing that, you know, a lot of people don't realize, aside from, you know, sales and books on shelves and awards, one of the most precious things about being a writer is the community you have with other writers, that ability to just sit down and talk about this crazy life that we've all subscribed to. And it is, for me, by far the most valuable thing about what I do. And, you know, it became into real contrast when we went into lockdown during COVID. And I had sort of taken it for granted. I'd loved my writing community, but suddenly I was deprived of it because I live in the middle of the country, nowhere. and all of a sudden, you know, I wasn't getting my fix of, you know, writers' festivals or events with other writers where you just got to sit down and have a cup of coffee and talk about this crazy life. And I missed it so much. And I felt myself so deprived as a result. So I think, you know, one of the things that is really wonderful about being a writer is your access to other writers and the sense of community that exists out there for people who, you know, want to spend their lives making stuff up.
I think that it also might be a good time for you to give everyone who is an aspiring writer in the chat. Also, this was like so lovely. I'm like, I want to join this club. But I think
you are the club.
Yeah.
it sounds so wonderful. It's like most heartwarming. But so we did have a very good question about writing. If you all have time to hang on for one more. Someone had asked, what is the best piece of writing advice you've received that you still use in your own writing?
I'll kick off. I read aloud. I read my work aloud because sometimes for me, I can hear things that are rough where I can't read it. And when I vocalize it, I can hear it. And if it's difficult to say, it's not right.
I totally agree with that. I have a thing on a thing. I don't know what it's called on my Word software that reads out loud. Do you have
I use that to edit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just have it. I have the reader, the AI reader, just read my manuscript out loud, and I do that every day as I start writing to get me back into the world of the book, and so I'm sort of drawn into that by the voice, and that's really helped me. And sometimes I actually dictate the manuscript now. Sometimes I just say it, and the conversation really comes out the way people would talk, and then I have to go back and put in all the punctuation later, which allows me to edit it, and so it allows me to see it. I think my advice is the muse only comes when you're working. So if you're sitting at your computer and you're writing, just let the story come out. And there is not a day that goes by when I don't think, this is terrible. This is completely terrible. This is the worst sentence that anyone has ever written. And then I think, yes, it is. Just go on and write another bad sentence, because you can right? You can fix it later.
Yeah.
You can fix it later. It's not a test. So you're just telling a story. Just trust yourself that the story will come out. It doesn't have to be perfect that first time around. It just has to be there.
Yeah, I think mine is really similar. And the advice I got, which was really game-changing, was just finish. I wanted to be a writer my whole life. And I didn't finish writing my first manuscript, like type of the words at the end, until pretty recently, maybe 5 years ago. And once I did that, once I realized that it is possible to write a book length thing, it changed everything. It changed everything. I didn't publish that book. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter because I knew I could write a book. And so don't worry, don't get fussed into the details, just finish, just get to the end, race to the end, and then you could fix it all later. But once you understand that about yourself, that you can write a book length thing, that it's possible, it really unlocks a whole new world. So just finish.
I remember when I finished my first novel, I called my husband into the room and I said, "Sweetheart, watch this." And I typed the end. And then I burst into tears. I just burst into tears.
It's amazing.
So it is a moment, Eva, that finishing is really, and of course it wasn't the end. It was the end
Of course,
early manuscript.
Yeah.
But I had a story.
Yeah. I always find myself dragging my feet a little bit with what I know is the very end, because I don't want to leave these people. Because by the end of the novel, I'm one of those people that falls in love by the end of the novel with these characters, and I find it really hard to say goodbye. And so that last page, I meander, drag it out, have a cup of coffee before I write that last sentence, etc., just to hang on for that few minutes more.
This feels like a really hurtful time for me to say we are all about to say goodbye. But I'm so appreciative of you allowing me to be a part of this conversation. All three of you were incredible, and I wish we had all 236 hands to applaud you at this moment. So I guess maybe it's just Marnie and I, but
Absolutely.
it's all there.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed this past hour. Thank you so much. And I'm starting to see thank yous coming in the chat. So those are your virtual applauds. And thank you to Sulari, Hank, Eva, Rachel for tonight's amazing program. Thank you to the partner libraries that worked with me on getting such interest in this program. And thank you to Mandy for making it all possible. Have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.